Hello and welcome to Precon Decon, the video series where I deconstruct the pre-constructed decks of Magic the Gathering's history. So this video is going to be a little bit special. Normally I only, in these videos, I only look at one deck. In this one, we're going to do something a little bit different, and we're going to look at 24 decks. So let me explain about this. So for me, it's been about a couple of weeks because I'm recording this right at the end of June, so you're probably going to see this mid-August. But a couple of weeks ago, well, for me at least, I put this community post saying that, I'm basically kind of ending the run of Precon Decon. I wasn't really enjoying putting the dual decks together. They weren't that exciting. People didn't seem that interested. But because I basically don't have much to do at the moment, it was basically kind of nagging at me like, oh, I do want to in some way do the ones that the dual decks that I haven't done yet. So what I thought was in this video I could go through the remaining decks we haven't done. So we went up to Venser versus Koth. After that, there's 12 more, which are all these. What I thought I could do one video where I zoom through all these really quickly, like not get into the nitty gritty, not look at like deck lists in detail, but just kind of quickly say what each deck was about, kind of what the theme was, maybe some notable reprints in the product, and just like which of the two I liked most. Just because I wanted to. Because I know there's like some people out there who probably really like at least one of these decks and were maybe a little disappointed that I didn't get to cover theirs. So I thought this would be an okay compromise where I get to get these all done. I get to kind of tick them off a to-do list, like going, I have talked about them in some way. And hopefully, it's interesting enough, that I zip through them quickly enough. We can just talk about them, and I don't know. Maybe one day I'll come back to some of these in more detail. Probably not, but you never know. But yeah, so without further ado, I said we've got a lot to get through, so I'm just going to make a start. We're going to zip through these really quickly, just talk about what the two decks are about, sort of like basic overview, basic strategies, and like some notable reprints in each product. So let's go. I've got my page of notes so I don't get anything wrong, but we'll see how it goes. Let's go. So the first one, Izzet versus Golgari. So the face cards for this were Niv Mizzet the Firemind and Jared Golgari Lightlord, who was a preview card. This product actually had 6 preview cards for the upcoming Return to Ravnica set. Obviously, it's blue-red versus black-green. It's blue-red spells matter, so a whole bunch of like things that trigger off, when you cast an instant or sorcery, that kind of thing. Obviously, some replicate cards, like some Izzet-themed cards. The Golgari deck was more, again, what you'd expect, kind of archetypal, grindy, graveyard recursion, dredge, that kind of thing. So of the two decks, some really nice reprints in this one actually. So the Izzet deck had Isochron Scepter, which was really nice. Had Fire and Ice with this new Izzet artwork, which at the time it worked with Isochron Scepter, like rules wise you could imprint it on, but now it doesn't, which is a real shame. But I mean, I get it because it's actually a really strong interaction. And the Golgari deck had Life from the Loam, which is still a card which actually goes for quite a lot of money. So some really like high value reprints in this set. Of the two, I think I would say I prefer the Izzet deck, but both were actually pretty good. This was actually the last dual deck I bought. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. No, Heroes and Monsters was the last one I bought. This is the last one. All right, this is the last one I bought and played the decks against each other, fresh out of the box, and had a good time. There we go. Okay, Sorin versus Tybalt. Let's go on to that one. So, face cards for this are Sorin, Lord of Innistrad, and Tybalt the Fiend-Blooded. So Sorin's deck is white-black. It's like tokens matter, and there's a very small vampire tribal element to it. Tybalt, who, despite being a terrible planeswalker, mostly because of that plus ability, if it didn't have discard at random, I think he'd be absolutely fine. But it's the random discard that really sets it apart. But a nice thing, Tybalt's deck is actually really strong, and I actually really like Tybalt's deck because it's actually full of like unearth and flashback cards to because there's a lot of kind of like draw discard. There's a lot of rummage effects in Tybalt's deck as well, which is black red. It's not mono red as you might think looking at the card here. So, of the two, actually, well, let's talk about some good reprints. So there's this Mortify in the Sorin's deck with this really nice new artwork, which is really great. Tybalt's deck has got some really nice cards in there. It's got Hellrider in it, which is like which at the time was going for quite a lot of money, so it was nice to have it in this project. And it also had this new art for Browbeat, which is genuinely one of my favorite cards in the entire game. I absolutely love Browbeat. It is genuinely one of my favorite cards. So to get it with this really cool new artwork was really fantastic. And I'm not going to be, I'll be honest, favoritism here. That actually generally tips it. Tybalt's deck being my favorite out of the two. But again, both of these were pretty good. Obviously, Sorin I think is the better of the two planeswalkers, but deck wise, the actual nitty gritty contents, both of these were actually pretty evenly matched from what I remember. Right, Heroes versus Monsters. This is the last one This is the last one I bought, and I thought it was an okay one to go out on. This is at the point where I was sort of fading out of Magic, honestly. So the face cards for this are Sun Titan with this super cool alternate artwork where he's like a giant like Spartan warrior, really cool. And it's like I don't think it's ever used again, which is a shame because it's so good. And then the other foil face was Polukranos, the World Eater. So another preview card from Theros, kind of like the Golgari one where we had a preview card from the upcoming set as one of the face cards with alternate artwork. It's just it's just a cool thing to make people want to buy it. So the hero deck is sort of like very basic red-white aggro. There's kind of like an aura sub-theme to it, but it's mostly like red-white weenies, kind of like a mix of like white-red cards from like Ravnica and Bot and Innistrad, that kind of thing. Just kind of small, aggressive creatures. The monsters deck is sort of like the opposite. It's red-green, sort of like it's basically just red-green fatties, like kind of ramp up a little bit and just have big creatures. So both decks are actually very simple and very straightforward. But again, for what I remember, they were pretty fun. They felt pretty evenly matched. So in terms of reprints, again, some really nice ones in this. So the Heroes deck had Miraculous Recovery, which is a reprint from Visions. I don't think it had been reprinted since then. Again, with this really cool like Theros themed artwork. So really nice to get Miraculous Recovery back. Winds of Wrath, which is a reprint from Exodus Stronghold, one of like the Tempest block sets. Because I said there was like a small like aura theme in the Heroes deck, so this was like kind of nice to have this in here as a board wipe. And then the Monsters deck had Regrowth, and this was I think the first time it'd been reprinted physically. I think it had a few digital reprints, but this is the first time I think it'd been reprinted physically. Again with new artwork and stuff, and it's just a really super efficient like recursion spell. So it's really nice to get Regrowth in there because it's like a really classic card. It's like from back in Alpha or something. So really nice to see this again, and like it's been reprinted a million times since, but this is the first time I think it had seen cardboard for a long while. So of these two, I think they were both really close to call. I think I ended up liking the Monsters one like a little bit more because it did have like some just other really nice stuff in there. I think it had like Beast Within and just some like red-green creatures that I really liked. So yeah, I think that sort of tipped it over the edge for me in which ones I liked most. Oh, right, and then Jace versus Vraska. This is not a great one. So the foil face cards for this are Jace, Architect of Thought, who's fine, whatever, and Vraska. So this was her only Planeswalker card at the time. These are obviously both okay. The decks are pretty abysmal, I think, honestly, after looking at them. So the Jace's deck is mono blue, and it's this weird mix of like mill, illusion tribal, suspend cards. It's kind of like it's very similar to the Jace versus Chandra Jace deck, where it is just like this real hodgepodge of stuff, and it doesn't really have much of an identity. It really is just like it just feels like a pile of random blue cards. And it's really frustrating because there's actually two ways it definitely could have gone. It either could have gone really heavy into illusion tribal with maybe something like Lord of the Unreal, because it had a lot of illusions that had a reprint of Krovikan Mist, which was really nice. Or it could have gone like just the full mill route, and that would have actually been an interesting counterpoint to Vraska's deck, which is obviously Golgari, so it's like Graveyard Matters again. And it would have been a thing of like, oh, you're trying to win by milling, but if you don't mill them enough, like you give them too many resources, something like that. And the Vraska deck is also like it's a bit of a mishmash, honestly. It doesn't have like a very defining identity to it. Is really just a mix of like just random green black cards from whatever. It's like there's like some morbid in there's like some flashback. It's these are both really bad. I think I really didn't like the look of these at all. I think the only saving grace is Jace's deck has got a reprint of Future Sight, which is a really cool blue enchantment with this really nice new artwork. Had a reprint of Control Magic, which I think had been in Commander 13 as well. But it was nice to get it here as well. It's like the OG kind of like mind control aura. So it was really nice to get both of those in there actually. And Vraska's deck at least has Rogue's Passage, which combos nicely with her ultimate that makes the assassins that if they get through and damage you, you lose the game. So that at least is okay. But like overall, like I think these were really weak. Like maybe not the weakest out of all the dual decks, but they're definitely like near the bottom. If I was going to do a tier list, which I'm not going to do, I'm afraid, because it doesn't feel fair to do a tier list if I haven't like reviewed all of them like properly. But these would definitely be bottom 5 because they're not very good at all. I don't think they're just all over the place. They're very badly made, I think. Right, speed versus cunning. So this was basically Mardu aggro. It has a sort of more small goblin tribal sub theme and like sort of sacrifice sub theme, and that was against Jeskai spells matter, so like all like ETB effects and also some morph and stuff. So the Jeskai deck is full of kind of tricksy, gimmicky mechanics, and the Mardu deck is just much more straightforward. It's just a really fast aggro deck, I say, with a small goblin sub theme. Face cards are Zergo Helm Smasher, who was a preview card for the upcoming Khan set, and Arcanus the Omnipotent on the other side. I love Arcanus the Omnipotent. I will just say I love that. To this day he's not been errataed to have like a like a race or anything, because like the whole point he's meant to be super mysterious. Even like the flavor text calls out to it. Like he is just wizard, which I think is super cool. And both these I think are really really great cards as well. I mean, maybe it would have been nice to have like a Jeskai colored creature for like the cunning face, but I think it's fine as is. But yeah. But I think both these were actually sort of okay looking at them. But I think I'd edge out to the Mardu one just because it has like a much tighter theme. I say like the Goblin Tribal Synergies. It's got Krenko in it, and Krenko's really strong. And I say when you got a whole bunch of other goblins and things that make goblin totems, Goblin Bombardment was in here as well, which is obviously like again like a really kind of strong enchantment, that goes with all those goblins you might be making, especially with Krenko. You crank out a bunch of goblin tokens and then just immediately sacrifice them, do a bunch of damage. But the Cunning deck had a reprint of Lightning Angel, which is really, really nice. I do wish Lightning Angel got new art, though, because it has been reprinted a few times. I know there's a lot of people who like the classic RK Post artwork, but like I do think it's time for like Lightning Angel to get a bit of a facelift. But also like I don't know, by these days standards, it's probably a little underpowered, honestly. Like just like 4 mana in 3 colors, for just a 3/4 flying vigilance haste that doesn't do anything else. I mean, honestly, probably bumped down to uncommon these days. But it was a cool reprint. I think it was the first time in it in a modern frame as well. So if that matters to you, I suppose. But yeah, overall, I think both these decks were pretty okay, but I think I did prefer the Mardu one a bit more. Right, moving on, Elspeth versus Kiora. So this was Elspeth's Sun Champion versus Kiora Crashing Wave, which was Kiora's only card at the time. So Elspeth's deck is, unsurprisingly, it's mono white soldiers, and it's just a better version of the Elspeth versus Tezzeret Elspeth deck, where that was had soldiers in it, but like there was no point because there was like no soldier payoffs really. This one like really doubles down. It has a whole bunch of like soldier tribal effects, so which is really good, which makes sense. Has like some really nice reprints in the well. Kiora's deck is just fairly standard like Simic ramp. It's just blue green, draw a bunch of cards, get a bunch of land out, play big sort of sea monsters. Not particularly bad or anything, but also not that interesting, I guess, because we just see like Simic ramp all the time these days. But again, like both of them, I think were pretty solid. In terms of reprints, Elspeth's deck I think came out really nice because it had reprints of all the Gust Cloak creatures, which were from Onslaught block, which they all have this unique ability where like if they attack and they become blocked, you can untap them, remove them from combat. So it makes like blocking them really difficult, especially if you attack with a bunch of other creatures that don't have the Gust Cloak ability. Gust Cloak saving gives Gust Cloak to everything, which is a really really strong ability. Also had a nice reprint of Mother of Runes with this lovely new artwork, and Mother of Runes is obviously just a really super strong card. Kura's deck, there wasn't really much in there that stood out to me in terms of reprints. Had Whelming Wave, I guess, which is like such a budget rare anyway, but I thought it was like kind of okay in Kura's deck because obviously her deck's full of like these kind of creatures. Yeah, like not too exciting, these ones. These ones were just kind of like solid, sort of like C plus. Both were fine. They weren't particularly bad, but they weren't also particularly interesting. So actually, probably would have struggled to talk about this one in any great detail. I would say I probably like the Elspeth's one a little bit more, just because I think the reprints were better. It was just nice seeing the Gust Cloak creatures all in new frames. Right, Zendikar versus Eldrazi. So this was coming out just before Battle for Zendikar. So foil face cards in this are Avenger of Zendikar and Oblivion Sower. Oblivion Sower is like the preview card for the upcoming set. So this one, so the Zendikar deck is a green-white deck that is again sort of like the Jace deck we just talked about. It is a real mishmash of stuff. It is a mix of basically all like the kind of Zendikar mechanics of like landfall, level up, and allies. It just means it's trying to do 3 different things at once, and it's not doing any of them really well. And like the card selection is like really pretty bad as well. Like Avenger of Zendikar is obviously super good. It's a really good card, but the actual then contents when you start getting into it are really it's not great. The Zendikar deck, the Eldrazi deck is I think a little bit better. It's a red-black deck, obviously with like a fairly significant portion of it over to given to like colorless cards to support the Eldrazi. So it's basically like red-black filler and then like a few big colorless Eldrazi cards. In terms of reprints, this one's actually really nice. So the Zendikar deck has basically like nothing of value, I would say. Scoot Mob I think was the closest high value sort of reprint card that I think in there. But the Eldrazi deck has It That Betrays, which is an absolute powerhouse. Obviously, if you can play it, it's 12 mana, but there are ways around it, like Eldrazi Temple, which is, again, like this still goes for like an insane amount of money, Eldrazi Temple, like for like an uncommon land. So yeah, the Eldrazi deck definitely had like some really nice reprints in there. And again, both decks had preview cards for the upcoming Zendikar set. Of the two, like definitely I prefer the Eldrazi deck. The Zendikar deck, again, if I was reviewing it more in depth, I would say it would be like bottom 5 out of all the dual decks I've looked at, because it really is a bit of a mess. It is just trying to do 3 different kind of things, and it's not doing any of them very well at all. So definitely the Eldrazi in this one. Right, Blessed versus Cursed. So this came out just before Shadows over Innistrad. So the foil face cards are Geist of Saint Traft, who was like this absolute at the time of original Innistrad, this was actually such a huge chase card because it still is really good. The price on it has calmed down a little bit more, but like at the time of release, it was like one of the best creatures around at the time. And then you got Mindrak Demon as well, which is sort of like a confusing face card to have, because the curse deck is, well, I'll talk about what they are. So the blessed deck, the white blue one, has a sort of a small human tribal sub theme. I wouldn't say it's the main theme. I'd say what the main theme to it is sort of like a blink ETB kind of strategies, sort of very similar to like the Venser deck we had, where that was like blue white and that did the same, like a lot of like blink ETB effects. So that's the blessed deck. The curse deck, I say, despite the demon being the foil face card, it's actually a blue-black sort of zombie deck. So using all like kind of these zombies from Innistrad, like the blue ones that you have to exile stuff from your graveyard to play them, but they're really undercosted for their stats and stuff, and just the classic black zombies who just could recur themselves. Both these actually are pretty good. I actually quite like both of these. In terms of reprints, so this wasn't a reprint; it was a preview card, but the Blessed deck had Eerie Interlude, which is a really great like mass flicker spell. The Curse deck has Gravecrawler. That was like the main thing that jumped out at me, because Gravecrawler went for quite a bit of money and sort of still does, just because it's very easy to recur and keep replaying it. And also had this really nice new artwork for Dread Return. Which like it's not a high value card, but like I wanted to raise it because I really like this artwork on Dread Return. I say both are pretty good. Again, they both had like Shadow over Innistrad preview cards. Of the two, I would say I liked the blessed one slightly more, I suppose, but it is very narrow to call that. But yeah, probably the blessed one. Also, the blessed deck is the last white dual deck. From here on, there's no more white dual decks. So there we go. Right, next one is Nissa versus Obnixilis, and kind of like, as we just had the last white dual deck, we've actually now got the last black dual deck and also the last Planeswalker dual decks. So the face cards are Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, and Obnixilis Reignited. Both of these, I think, are just really solid, nice picks. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with them. Nissa's deck is just mono green ramp, just ramp out and like to play extra lands, ramp out into big creatures. Obnixilis is just mono black, like good stuff, I would say. It's just kind of a mix of like iconic black effects, like just like kill spells and discard and like just big demons. I would say it's actually kind of like a better version of the divine versus demonic, like demonic deck. I would say it's a better version of that. It's like, just because it's using newer, better cards, I suppose. In terms of reprints, not actually a lot stood out here. It was all fairly like, it was okay, but like nothing jumped at me as being like a really high value reprint. Nissa's deck has Abundance, which is, I mean, it's a good card. But it's not crazy strong, I suppose. Obnix's deck had Desecration Demon, which I thought I'd mention here just because it's a card I really enjoy. I really like the flavor of Desecration Demon, that if you keep feeding him, he won't attack you, but he gets stronger, which I think is just a fun design. And also had like this new artwork for Doomblade, which is really nice. But yeah, both these are like sort of like the Elspeth versus Kiora, like fairly solid, like decently okay, not too exciting, but again both like solid, like C plus B minus. Of the two, maybe like Obnixilis, I think, just because I like Desecration Demon and it's in the deck, and I like that Doomblade art, so that's the very small justification I said to. I prefer the Obnixilis one, but again, like the Elspeth versus Kiora one, it's a really close call. They're both, I think, pretty okay. Right, Mind versus Might. So Mind versus Might is, so this is blue red, sort of like control spells matter, against Might, which is red green aggro. So the Mind deck, face card for that is Joy of the Gaitu. So a big theme of the Mind deck actually is like setting up like a big storm turn. As it has a whole bunch of storm cards in it, has a whole bunch of like suspend cards as well. So it actually reminds me of the Time Spiral blue red deck, which was all about, you know, storm and suspend as well. The whole point is you set up a bunch of suspend cards and you set up for the perfect turn where you have all your suspend cards go off and then you cast storm and you get a bunch of copies from storm. Also has a bunch of arcane cards in there from Kamigawa as well, which was kind of interesting, I suppose. And then the Might deck has Lovisa Cold Eyes as the face card, which is one of the first legendary cards I ever built a deck around. Not a commander deck, just a normal 60 card deck, but I thought just because her effect is just really straightforward, just bumps up barbarians, warriors, and berserkers. That deck is much more straightforward. It's obviously like these three main creature types that Lovisa gives bonuses to. It's just very straightforward, like aggro deck, honestly. In terms of reprints, the Minds deck has the Unspeakable combat, where it has the Unspeakable with nice new artwork, and it has that whole combo from Kamigawa, the was it Sift Through Sands, Pierce Through Mists, and Reach Through Depths, something like that. But it has that whole combo to get the Unspeakable out, which I think is pretty interesting. Also has Young Pyromancer, who was and still is like a fairly well regarded card, like goes for a decent amount of money, so it was nice to have that in there. I say there is a whole kind of instant sorceries matter, kind of like the Izzet deck. So yeah, nice to have Young Pyromancer in there. Not much interesting in the Might deck. What really stood actually was Zozu the Punisher, with again like nice new artwork here from Kamigawa. And I was actually surprised looking at how much Zozu actually goes for, because he's not been reprinted that much, and yeah, he's like a $15 card or something, because I mean his effect's really strong, just does burn damage whenever anyone plays a land, so yeah, kind of like a notable reprint there, I suppose. But yeah, of the two, yeah, I prefer the Mind deck. It just seems like more interesting to play. Has more sort of like bells and whistles and levers to pull. Just seems more interesting to play. But again, both are like fairly okay. Like neither of them are bad. I just prefer the Minds deck. Right, Merfolk versus Goblins. So this is unsurprisingly mono blue Merfolk against mono red Goblins. The Merfolk one is actually a bit surprising to me because it came out after Ixalan. It barely uses any Ixalan Merfolk, which I thought was kind of odd. But like, it's not like Merfolk are hurting for good options. So for face card is there is Master of Waves, who was really good card back in like original Theros days. Just comes in, makes a whole bunch of tokens. And then the Goblin deck is obviously mono red. Face card is Warren Instigator again, who's like a really nice card. Aggressively costed, helps you cheat goblins into play. And it's the Goblin deck is based just an upgraded, better version of the original Elves versus Goblins dual deck, which was the very first one we looked at. There's not much to say. It's just full of like both these decks again, really, really good. They're both full of just really solid creatures. A lot of like tribal synergies, obviously. The Merfolk deck actually has Master of the Pearl Giant. It actually has a bunch of lords. I think it has 3 or 4 of the Merfolk lords, which is really, really good. It also has Misdirection, which is another one of these fun like. It's actually become like a running thing in these in these dual decks to get like one of these like Mercadian Masks block like free spells reprinted, like in a new, in a new frame, maybe with new artwork. But yeah, it's been actually kind of a running thing because we've had like Snuff Out, we've had Invigorate, we've had Daze, we've had Foil, all those kind of like old Mercadian Masks like free spells. And also the Goblin deck has Relentless Assault, which I was surprised by Relentless Assault how much it actually still goes for. It's like a sort of a $5-6 card, even though it's been reprinted in a whole bunch of core sets and like in commander set as well, still goes for quite a high secondary market price. I mean, because it's obviously a very strong effect. But yeah, I was actually surprised how much it actually still goes for. This is the first one I generally can't pick which of the two I like. I think both are actually equally good. I keep flip flopping on which one I like more. So we'll just say this is probably the only dual deck where it's a draw between the two. I generally couldn't pick which of the two I like most. Right, and then the final one, Elves versus Inventors. So it's actually really interesting. The last two dual decks have had goblins and elves in them, which was that was the very first dual deck we looked at. So it's really nice that goblins and elves both got like updated versions, sort of like about 10 years later, 10, 11 years later, because the first one came out just after Lorwyn and this was just after Kaladesh. So yeah, about 10, 11 years, I think. So obviously the elf deck is mono green elves. You got Azuri Renegade Leader as the face card, who's just a really great elf tribal effect, just very straightforward, strong effects. And the Inventors deck has Goblin Welder, which is like a really, really strong reprint. I think it's the first reprint this has had in a modern frame. It's still like, again, like a $15, $20 card because its effect is so strong where you just like swap artifacts, between artifacts you have in play with artifacts you have in the battlefield. Really, really, really strong effect. But the Inventor deck is, as you might expect, it's sort of like blue-red, artifacts matter, so there's a lot of kind of metal craft in there. Yeah, just a lot of that, really. In terms of reprints, the Elf deck has Regal Force. Like that was the most notable reprint to me. The rest of it is just kind of like just generically good Elf cards, like nothing that jumped out too much. The Inventor deck has Darksteel Plate, which was another card I was actually surprised how much it goes for. Again, it's like $10 card, I think, which seems crazy to me. I mean, it's obviously very strong, but I didn't think it was, it went for that much. And it also has Sad Robot, Solemn Simulacrum, which is okay. But apart from that, it's fairly standard sort of mix of like the new Kaladesh stuff and some Mirrodin stuff like Metalcraft, like Galvanic Bolt and stuff. So of the two, again, this was a tough one to call, but I think my heart belongs to the blue-red Inventor deck. Just again, it just seemed more interesting. Like that just appeals to me more. But I could easily see flipping to the Elf deck as well because that's just very strong and straightforward, I suppose. So there we go. So we ran through all 12 of those dual decks, just gave a quick summary on each of them and kind of what each of the decks were. I'm sorry, like this wasn't as in depth maybe as I could have gone. I feel like there was an okay compromise though in talking about all of them in some way. And I say, one day I might go back, might revisit them in more in depth, maybe get more into the nitty gritty of them. Some of them I think don't really deserve a further deep dive into. Like if I'm honest, like the Nissa Ob Nixilis or like the Elspeth Kiora ones, there's not really much to talk about because they're just okay, they're just fine, like they're not really bad. I could probably talk more about the Jace versus Vraska ones or like the Zendikar Eldrazi ones because those aren't great, but at least then I could talk about them more. But I don't know, that's definitely on the back burner for a long while to see if I maybe come and revisit those. I say I just wanted to sort of like close up, tie things off, like close the loop, and like finally like talk about all the dual decks in some way, even if it is a very quick run through like this. But I would love to know what you think about, well, this kind of like format of video where I've just run through things very, very quickly and just given a summary. I know it's very different to what I usually do, where I do a more in-depth card by card deck list analysis. But yeah, I couldn't, I just didn't have it in me to do 24 more videos about those dual decks. But I did want to talk about them in some way. So I do hope this was an acceptable compromise. Like, if you had any of those dual decks there that I mentioned, if you had any of those, if you particularly liked them, if you've got your own thoughts or comments or stories, opinions about any of those decks, please stick a comment below and we'll give those a read as I always do. But so it feels weird to say this is the end of looking at the dual decks, but it kind of is. I say for the foreseeable, unless I do that thing where I go back and look at them, which, if I'm honest, I probably won't. So it feels anticlimactic, but I'm afraid it is what it is. But at least I did get to talk about them a little bit. So in terms of what we've got coming up now, as I said, I had that community update where I said I'm kind of not doing maybe Precon Decon as much. I'll probably be looking at starter kits as they come out. Actually, probably the next video after this will probably be the Bloomburrow starter kit, because that would probably have just come out in some way, because I think Bloomburrow would, yeah, it would be around this time if you're seeing this in August. But yeah, and then I'll just carry on with Get Decked as well, so I'll probably do some decks for like Bloomburrow as that's come out, like decks based around the draft archetypes like I did for the Thunder Junction ones. But yeah, aside from that, just like normal videos, normal content might just carry on. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. So it's very different to what I do. I hope in some way, if you had one of those dual decks, I did it a little bit of justice in some way by talking about it. But I say, any comments, leave them down below. I'm going to stop rambling. Thanks for watching, listening, and have a great day.